Hello everyone, greetings and welcome to my channel. Today we will examine yet another horrifying case together. Admitting to your parents that you've decided to organize your own wedding is a thrilling experience. Tina Thomas was far more anxious than Gabe Watson, her fiancé. Like her future husband, Tina was 26 years old at the time, and this was both her second attempt at getting married and her third significant relationship. Her first marriage to Scott McCulloch, her boyfriend, did not work out. The young people's connection was excellent, but Tina's mother was opposed to the wedding and disliked Scott in particular. She wanted her kid to have a better and happier life, just like every mother does, but she made no specific claims. Additionally, Tina was still quite little at the time. Because of this, the couple's hopes for a future together quickly faded. Stan Marks's second effort did not succeed either. Tina's parents had no involvement in this. The initial 3-year crisis was too much for the couple to handle, and they mutually decided to split up. Finally, Tina meets Gabe Watson at a friend's Christmas Eve party. We can't claim that it was love at first sight. Rather, the partnership was more based on mutual support following a previous separation. Granted, this might not be the happiest excuse to begin a fresh relationship, but 2 years later, Gabe asked Tina to marry him. Tina, who had suffered a painful lesson the hard way, acknowledged that she couldn't do it without her parents' approval. Like a true prince, Gabe picked Valentine's Day 2003 as the occasion to make a lovely and romantic appeal to his chosen one's parents. However, Tina's father was out of town, so the dinner was rescheduled for February 15th. When Watson announced at the dinner that he intended to live hand in hand with Tina for the rest of his life, the bride's father asked the groom a fairly straightforward question: did he love Tina? Like a schoolboy, Gabe stammered but never responded. His father assumed that this kind of response was typical of embarrassed strangers. Then he posed the same query to his daughter. Remarkably, Tina did not immediately respond to this issue either. Instead, she started her speech by expressing her fear of being by herself at the age of 26. After giving it some thought, the father blessed the children. It takes a lot of time and work to prepare for a wedding, and Gabe was just thinking about the honeymoon, while Tina was thinking about her dress, her guests, and the entire event. Since he had previously planned every aspect of his future wife's vacation, he could not really care how she chose to spend it. His objective was to travel to the Pacific Ocean, close to Australia, and dive the Great Barrier Reef. His primary goal was to see the sunken ship, the Townsville Titanic, which sank in 1911. The issue was that Tina had little interest in diving, in contrast to Gabe. Yes, he did occasionally take her scuba diving in the pool under lifeguard supervision in calm water, but not more than that. Gabe was a skilled scuba diver in his own right. At the time, he had completed over 50 dives as part of a rescue diving school, and none of them had taken place in a pool. "If you don't learn to dive by our honeymoon, I'm warning you right away you're staying home walking the dog or pruning roses in the garden. You're not going anywhere with me," stated Gabe. In actuality, Tina had no choice. In order to pay for her fiancé's training and purchase her own equipment, Gabe even took out a loan. Tina's first teacher was dissatisfied with her abilities and even forewarned Gabe that his fiancée lacked any ability to swim in the open ocean. Enraged, Gabe refused to listen to the diving instructor and refused to go on with the class, claiming he was the one who was incapable of explaining. The second teacher swiftly granted Tina credit, but not before pointing out that she goes above and above to appease her future spouse. The young couple finally tied the knot on October 11th, and 2 days later, Tina and Gabe took a $10,000 trip to Australia, which they paid for using money Gabe's father had given them for the wedding. It's important to mention that Gabe spent a portion of his honeymoon with Tina. They went to the zoo, the Sydney Aquarium, and took walks about Sydney. Tina was happy at first, but her excitement turned to sadness as they neared their trip to the Great Barrier Reef. They took a plane to Townsville early on October 21st, then in the evening they boarded a boat to one of the planet's most stunning locations and a diver's paradise. Employees of the diving company will eventually reveal that, in reality, the couple did not appear to be seasoned divers, and even Gabe, who had completed courses and gained experience previously, found it difficult to comprehend the equipment, as if it were unfamiliar to him. Nevertheless, he was the one who assisted Tina in passing the test before to diving, even though it ought to be administered independently. Moreover, Tina turned down the instructor's offer of assistance when he was submerged. There was a strong current that day, as was also mentioned in the dive log, and this historical occasion shouldn't be overlooked. As mentioned earlier, Gabe assisted his wife in organizing the equipment they had purchased in the United States and proceeded to retrieve the tanks they needed to rent. Given Tina's experience, or rather, lack thereof, Gabe handed his wife an 8 1/2 L tank and kept an 11 L tank for himself. This was a very tiny volume for this location, if not unsafe. Descending to the Townsville Titanic from the first level was not feasible. Tina requested more cargo since she was unable to dive to a depth, and Gabe initially malfunctioned the underwater computer, which determines the required diving and ascending speed and displays the oxygen content of the cylinders. They tried again after they got back to the boat, and the computer was operational. Tina was the first to go under the 49-foot deep wreck, with Gabe swimming after her. According to Gabe's statement, initially, everything was all right. Tina eventually stopped, began to wave at me, and then motioned for me to follow her up. I realized right away that she was just panicking. She used to do that. By this time, we were halfway up, so I decided to calm her down and stay with her at the same depth for a while without further diving, so that she could psychologically get used to the pressure. She continued to breathe very deeply, which was unsafe, and that's when I noticed she was sinking. I tried to grab her belt to hold her down, but she swung her arm so hard that she knocked the mask off my face. While I was putting the mask back on my face, though it didn't take long, Tina was already too far away from me. For a while I tried to swim to her, but I was unsuccessful. Then I decided to return to the surface to ask for help from the lifeguards. On the way, I met another swimmer with a narrow set eye, but he paid no attention to my signs for help. Yes, there were 2 Asian males at their depth, but neither of them corroborated what Gabe had said about needing assistance. The climb to the surface was not an emergency, although Gabe did attempt to swim after his wife, who was dying for a bit before giving up relatively fast, according to underwater computer readings that the police later obtained. Gabe, on the other hand, emerged as directed, pausing at every reached depth. When questioned by the authorities, the other divers all stated that Gabe could have saved his wife, but he just didn't. Furthermore, since this unfortunate event happened right at the start of their dive, Gabe had enough oxygen in his tanks to swim to the bottom and back up to the surface. As soon as they learned what had happened, the ship's rescue crew went in search of Tina and discovered her very quickly, but sadly, it was too late. At 82 feet below the surface, Tina was laying on her back with her eyes open under her mask. Her body was raised right away, and for about 40 minutes they attempted artificial breathing on the yacht's deck, but it was unsuccessful. Tina passed away. Witnesses said that during this entire time, Gabe remained distant from his wife and merrily stood there innocently sniffing his nosy. The young man reportedly grinned and even played cards with other passengers on the way to the shore, according to the same firm employees. That was Gabe's denial in court. Not anything was as obvious as the autopsy on Tina that followed. Sure, there aren't any overt indications of a violent death, but Tina's body was discovered at a depth of 82 feet, and there are bruises on her neck and blood traces in her nose. The blood contains large amounts of medications, such ibuprofen and paracetamol. Even though these are used to cure seasickness, there are no evidence of alcohol present. There was some fluid visible in the lungs. Although Tina's death was reported to be due to drowning, it's plausible that she was already oxygen deprived when she drowned. The Australian Water Police examined Tina's equipment. Nonetheless, no issues were found. The police may have dismissed it as an accident since, regrettably, it is a very typical occurrence for a novice diver to disregard safety precautions and pay the price with his life. However, there were just a few dubious aspects in this tale, such the somewhat confusing autopsy results and Watson's peculiar demeanor, which did not fit the typical narrative of a husband mourning his recently deceased wife, according to the dive crew. The inquiry took a while because all of these variables made it difficult to wrap up the case quickly. It dawned on Gabe that the investigators were looking for him. Apart from that, Tina's parents did not want to regard what had happened as a terrible accident, if not as their daughter's murderer, then at least as a guy who had failed to assist her. The suspect was in shock, weeping and laughing, twitching anxiously, pleading with him to phone his father, who was complaining of ear discomfort, and urging him to tell his wife's parents about the catastrophe the police saw during the first interrogation. Gabe was set free late in the evening. He went to the company's yacht that had taken them to the reef and requested a night's accommodation, claiming that although their 2-day excursion was scheduled to last, they had only spent a day there due to his wife's passing. In addition, he requested a reimbursement for 50% of the dive fee. He never did see the sunken ship, in reality. Gabe's mother is flying to Townsville on October 24th to support her son and assist him in finding legal representation. They visit the morgue that day at Gabe's request. The morgue staffer called the lead investigator because Gabe wanted to see his wife again, because the husband was still being investigated as a suspect. Theoretically, Gabe could have concealed some evidence, but the distraught husband simply sobbed, grasped his wife's chilly hand, and pleaded for her forgiveness, not thinking at all that the policeman was outside the door at the moment taping him. Detective Lawrence later presents Gabe with the statement, "I didn't mean to hurt you," in court. Lawrence will ask, "Then, at the morgue, you told Tina you didn't mean to hurt her. What did you mean by that?" On the way home with his wife's body, Gabe told the same old story about his painful ear. He went to the airport grounds in Oakland during a layover and requested medical assistance. He was detained there while being assessed. The investigation found that this was deliberate action taken to keep Tina's father at bay. Divers will attest to the fact that ear issues are a somewhat frequent condition among them. On November 5th, Tina's funeral was held, and Gabe still needed to see the father of the deceased. In front of nearly everyone, Gabe removed his wife's wedding band and placed it on his ring finger over hers. He also gave his father-in-law the earrings right away. That day marked the end of Watson's relationship with the Thomas family. When asked, "Did you really take your wife's jewelry off during the funeral?" Later in the trial, Gabe will merely shrug and smile. "I don't think I could have done it." Later on, everyone's thoughts about Gabe diverged. While some described this plump and humorous man as a desperado and a tyrant, others believed he was actually quite a decent man. One thing, though, was acknowledged by all. Gabe and Tina were unhappy, or at least didn't appear to be. What Tina had said to her father during a family meal on February 15th was verified by her friends. She had died on the seabed because she was afraid of dying alone, and her marriage to Gabe was only a means of avoiding that fate. In addition, the victim, who passed away just before their honeymoon, confessed to a friend that her husband pulled her by the elbow to an insurance firm and made her sign a beneficiary form and insure his life at a higher interest rate in the event of his death. The insurance agent verified all of the information in this testimony. They also questioned the cabbie who took the couple to the yacht. Tina sobbed the entire time, but her spouse ignored her. At last, another account from Tina's friend Amanda Phillips revealed the true nature of the couple's connection. This jerk turned it on during a general viewing with a full house of guests, laughing like a horse while everyone twiddled their fingers around their temples, and tried to explain to him that it was nothing like what they thought it was. He recorded Tina urinating in the bathroom, edited it, and put it in a tape of them celebrating Christmas. That would have been okay. I was holding crosses between my fingers in a very low manner, hoping Tina wouldn't acquire the idea to wed him. While taking off jewelry during a funeral would seem like a scary and condemning gesture on Gabe's behalf, the jury saw incredibly unsettling video during Watson's 2008 trial of him visiting Tina's grave, picking all the flowers off and carting them away. Later on, they were discovered in a neighboring garbage can. When Tina's father realized that some flowers were stolen, he set up a concealed camera in the next row among the monuments to catch the culprit. He was shocked to see Gabe on the film and was taken aback by the act. Gabe's case in court was that he and his wife had talked about their own death while on an intense honeymoon, and that she had requested that there be no flowers on the grave, which seemed incredibly unusual and implausible. If the police hadn't staged the incident and worn the exact same clothing as the newlyweds, who knows how long the hunt for proof would have taken. According to Gabe, Tina drowned as he was attempting to cover her face with a mask. It turned out that unless you used another supply of air, it was difficult to put on the mask underwater by yourself. Tina's oxygen, in this instance. After being taken into custody by Australian authorities in late November 2008, Gabe's trial began on June 5, 2009, and he entered a guilty plea, but only for failing to save his wife. He was therefore given an 18-month prison sentence and charged with negligent homicide. Gabe served his term and then left the country to return home. However, a year later, he was charged with first-degree murder by the now U.S. court, with the intention of using the money to pay his insurance after his wife passed away. Gabe's attorney attempted to defend his client by placing all the blame on the diving company, The attorney claimed that the company's employees neglected tourists' safety and are now trying to place the blame on the unhappy husband who has already served his time in another country out of fear of losing their license and the entire business. Regarding the money that Gabe got from the insurance company, the settlement was $33,000, but he spent a lot more on legal counsel and other services. Even still, the prosecution persisted in claiming that the husband's inability to expect that he would not be believed was the main reason for the spending, and they would not accept the fact that Gabe, who had a degree in drowning rescue, was unable to save his own wife. Gabe addressed the jurors after he had his word. "It's been 7 years since the tragedy, and there hasn't been a day that I haven't thought about that terrible day. The public has pounced on me, blaming me for my wife's death, calling me a murderer. There wasn't a single person who looked me in the eye and said, 'Yes, I understand how bad you feel, but it's not your fault.' On the contrary, everyone just wants me dead. And here, I can only understand my late wife's parents. Yes, they will never forgive me, no matter how much I kneel before them, and no matter how much I beg their forgiveness." You often hear the phrase, "I can't imagine what it's like to lose a child," but I've never heard anyone say, "I can't imagine what it's like to lose a wife, especially on a honeymoon." If I can be accused of anything, it's that I didn't make enough effort to save Tina, but I've already received my punishment for that. Perhaps you all would have been satisfied if I had drowned with my wife then, 7 years ago, but I was afraid to die, afraid I wouldn't be able to rise from the bottom to the top. I just wanted to live, as I still want to live now. Gabe's guilt was not demonstrated to the court by any proof. Gabe was judged not guilty by the jury. What are your thoughts, guys? Is Gabe responsible for Tina's demise? I appreciate you everyone watching. There are a lot of surprising stories ahead, so subscribe to the channel.